Victoria never meant to sing that day. Not when the office was so empty, so silent. She thought she was alone. But when she turned around and saw Junho standing there, eyes locked on her like she was the only person in the world, that's when everything changed. 3 weeks earlier, Victoria's life was far simpler, if you could call juggling 3 jobs in a foreign country simple. She'd been living in Seoul for over a year now, yet the city still seemed to breathe secrets she longed to uncover. Her tiny studio apartment was cramped and drafty, but she'd decorated it with little strings of fairy lights, Polaroids of new friends, and tiny ceramic hanok houses that made her smile when she walked through the door. Most mornings, Victoria rose before dawn. The street outside bustled with delivery trucks, the scent of freshly baked bread floating up from the bakery on the corner. She'd pull on a simple blouse and black pants, check her modest makeup in the cracked mirror, then whisper a soft waiting to herself before stepping into the chilled air. Her days were filled with polite bows and breathless subway transfers. She taught English to high schoolers in the mornings, wiped down cafe tables through lazy afternoons, then dashed across town to fold sweaters at a boutique until closing. Her feet ached constantly, and her mother's voice, crackling through WhatsApp late at night, was the only thing that kept her from splintering. But no matter how long and heavy the days felt, Victoria never stopped marvelling at Seoul. The cherry blossoms that painted entire streets pink in spring. The ajamas selling tok on the sidewalks, the way neon signs lit the city like a living heartbeat. Sometimes she'd pause on her walk home and whisper, "Someday I'll belong here for real." Then, one evening, everything shifted. Scrolling through job boards at her small table, half asleep over a cup of instant coffee, she spotted a listing that nearly made her spill her drink. L&P Production, one of Korea's biggest entertainment giants, famous for managing chart-topping idol groups, soulful soloists, and even producing hit drama soundtracks, was seeking international hires. Creative support, global liaison staff, people fluent in English with even a hint of artistic understanding. Her heart thudded. She clicked through, reading and rereading every line. On a reckless surge of hope, she pulled together her patchwork resume, listing every local gig, every minor coordinating job she'd done for small bands back home, and attached a shy cover letter that she rewrote 5 times. Weeks passed. She tried not to obsess. Then, one morning, an email landed in her inbox. "Congratulations, Victoria. We are pleased to offer you a position at L&P Productions, Seoul headquarters." She couldn't breathe. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she pressed a hand to her mouth. That night, she danced barefoot on her cold floor, laughing through sobs. For the first time in so long, she felt seen. Working at L&P was a dream, and a silent battlefield. The building itself glittered like a promise, hallways alive with quiet power, staff whispering constantly about one man. CEO Lee Junho. Cold, brilliant, so devastatingly handsome that people claimed it made rejection from him almost hurt worse. And always near him was Mira, a director born into wealth, whose family had known Junho's for decades. Everyone murmured that a marriage between them was only a matter of time, and it was no secret Mira was determined to make it happen. Victoria's first week, she nearly collided with him coming out of a conference room, arms loaded with files. She stumbled, breath catching in her throat, expecting disaster. But Junho simply stepped aside with smooth precision, his dark eyes locking on hers for a heartbeat that stretched painfully long, sharp and searching, like he was trying to memorize the lines of her startled face. Then he gave the faintest nod, the tiniest flicker of something unreadable crossing his expression, before turning and continuing down the hall without a word. It wasn't kindness, it wasn't even warmth, but somehow it left her heart rattling, like a door she'd thought forever closed had cracked open just enough to let in the chill. She kept her head down after that, filed contracts, answered calls, grateful just to be part of it all. But life, and fate, had far more in store for her than dusty files and polite nods. And it would all begin with a simple, unguarded song. Victoria's morning began like any other. Polite bows, muted greetings, the low hum of office printers. But underneath it all, her nerves danced wildly. Today, she was helping finalize a major international proposal running between departments with stacks of contracts that felt as heavy as bricks. She emerged from the elevator on the executive floor, carefully balancing a towering pile of documents. Her heart pounded. This was the realm of people who made decisions that shaped entire careers, and whose quiet whispers could end them. Conference rooms here weren't just filled with contracts. Sometimes chart-topping singers or rookie actors flitted through, nodding shyly to executives in tailored suits. Victoria often found herself quietly starstruck, but she kept her head down, desperate to prove she belonged. At the corner, she hesitated. Then, exhaling slowly, she stepped forward. That was when everything unravelled. In her rush, she didn't see the man turning the same corner. They collided hard. Papers flew like startled birds, scattering in graceful arcs before floating down around them. For a stunned heartbeat, neither moved. Then Victoria dropped to her knees, hands scrambling over glossy sheets. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. I didn't see." A shadow fell over her. She looked up and froze. Jun-ho. Even here, dishevelled with a stray contract sheet clinging to his tailored sleeve, he looked carved from stone. His sharp jaw tensed, eyes like cold night seas staring down at her. Something in her chest constricted painfully, but for a breathless moment something flickered in those eyes. Surprise, maybe even faint wonder. Then it was gone. He crouched, long fingers gathering scattered sheets with swift precision. "Be more careful," he said, voice low, controlled, but somehow lacking the bite she expected. "Be more careful, not 'who are you, you're fired,' not 'leave my building.'" Their hands brushed over the same document. Victoria's breath caught. This time, his eyes didn't flick away immediately. They stayed, studying her with a slight narrowing, as if trying to solve a puzzle that had unexpectedly landed at his feet. Then he stood, offering her the stack in one elegant motion. His hand lingered half a heartbeat longer than necessary before pulling back. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, bowing so quickly she nearly lost her balance again. He paused, his mouth opening slightly like he might say more. Then he shut it, turned, and walked away, but only after a fleeting glance over his shoulder, his brow drawn tight. Victoria's heart wouldn't calm. Even hours later at her desk, her hands trembled as she filed the recovered documents. Co-workers peeked over partitions, whispering. She could almost hear their thoughts. Who is she to have the CEO himself stoop and help pick up her mess? And Mira certainly noticed. From the far side of the floor, the elegant director watched her with narrowed eyes, lips pressed into a thin, dangerous line. A cold shiver raced down Victoria's spine. She ducked her head, praying to blend into her pile of files. That night, Victoria lay on her tiny bed staring at the ceiling. Her mind replayed every detail. The slight warmth of Jun-ho's fingers, the way he'd looked at her, not with disgust or dismissal, but something she couldn't quite name. It was foolish. He was her CEO, way out of reach, engaged in everything but name to a woman like Mira, who practically sparkled with the life Victoria only dreamed of. Still, somewhere deep inside, a fragile hope dared to flicker. And that terrified her more than anything else. Victoria kept her head low the rest of the week, hoping to fade back into the sea of navy suits and polite nods. But fate, it seemed, was determined to keep her tangled with Lee Jun-ho. On Thursday, the atmosphere at L&P was electric. Executives from a major European label were visiting to finalize a collaborative deal, one that could launch L&P's artists deeper into the global spotlight. The conference room buzzed with anticipation, directors smoothing ties, assistants flitting about with steaming trays of coffee. Victoria was there purely by accident. She'd been called in to drop off updated contract briefs, planning to slip in and out before anyone noticed. But the moment she stepped inside, her breath caught. Junho stood at the head of the sleek table, dark suit impeccable, expression a perfect mask of icy authority. Even from across the room, he exuded a quiet, dangerous power that pulled all eyes, including hers. As Victoria laid the documents at the table, her hands shook slightly. She tried to retreat unnoticed, but a French delegate glanced up, scanning her badge. "Oh, Victoria, yes, the English coordinator. Perhaps you could clarify this clause?" Her stomach dropped. Words, legal English, she could handle that, but under Junho's watchful eyes? With a breath, she stepped closer, leaning over the delegate's tablet to gently explain the section he'd flagged. Her voice steadied as she spoke, pointing out term nuances and cross-border royalty conditions. When she finished, silence stretched for a moment. Then the Frenchman smiled. "Excellent. Very clear. Thank you, miss. Victoria?" She dipped her head. Out of the corner of her eye, she sensed Junho watching, one eyebrow just slightly raised. But there was something else there too, a faint shift in his cold expression, almost like quiet approval laced with reluctant interest. It sent her heart galloping. His hand, which rested lightly on the table, curled into a fist for the briefest moment. Then his pen tapped once, a hard, precise motion that betrayed how tightly he was reining something in. As Victoria moved away, his eyes followed her a heartbeat too long. His lips parted, breath catching, as though he might say something, but instead he exhaled sharply, almost under his breath. "Why her?" It was so quiet no one else heard, not even him fully. Just a frustrated whisper he seemed to direct at himself, as if annoyed by a pull he couldn't understand. Not everyone was pleased. Later that afternoon, Mira cornered her near the elevator. The director's perfume hit first. Sharp, floral, expensive. Her painted lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Impressive performance today. Very eager to show off in front of the CO, aren't we?" Victoria's mouth fell open. I was just answering a question." "Relax," Mira cut in coolly. "I'm only warning you. Some people know how to stay in their place. Others—" Her eyes drifted over Victoria's modest outfit, her dark hand clutching the folder to her chest. "End up embarrassing themselves, or worse." Unseen by either of them, down the hall, Junho passed by, catching only the tail end of Mira's cold warning. His brow furrowed faintly, but he kept walking, lips pressed into a tighter line than usual. That evening, Victoria sat at her tiny kitchen table, tea growing cold between her palms. Mira's words echoed through her chest, heavy and bruising. What place did she have here truly, in this world of towering offices, legacy families and silk thread alliance? And yet, when she closed her eyes, all she saw was Junho's faint nod across that conference table. Heard his low-clipped voice when he'd said, "Make sure Victoria receives the updated briefs directly next time." Was it foolish to let that tiny moment spark anything in her heart? Probably. But dreams, like songs, didn't always ask permission before blooming. By Monday morning, a new energy surged through L&P's polished halls. Posters gleamed along the walls, printed in bold Korean and accented by delicate music notes swirling around microphones. Global Harmony Project. Discover the next voice of L&P. It was all anyone could talk about. Even the serious legal team clustered near a poster, murmuring excitedly. Victoria paused in front of one outside the staff lounge, heart racing. The company wasn't just opening auditions to signed trainees, it was searching within. Any staff member could submit a demo. If selected, they'd record under L&P's legendary production teams, maybe even perform at showcases. Her chest tightened. This was the chance she'd been whispering to ceilings and cracked mirrors for years. During a crowded floor meeting, Mira stood poised at the front, details of the project sliding effortlessly from her painted lips. Her gaze flicked over the room like she owned it. "Of course," she said sweetly. "Only true potential will move forward. L&P does not risk its global reputation on hopeful amateurs." Victoria felt her hands clench at her sides, nails digging into her palm. But when the question period ended, she still stepped forward to collect the application guidelines. Her heart might tremble, but it wouldn't stay quiet. That night, Victoria sat cross-legged on her narrow bed, laptop open. She filled out her application slowly, carefully, attaching a simple demo she'd recorded on her phone, a raw version of a song that had followed her since she was 12. Her thumb hovered over the submit button. What if Mira was right? What if this dream was too foolish, too fragile to survive this world? But then she thought of Junho's eyes that day in the conference room. How for a split second it seemed he'd seen something in her worth acknowledging. Click. The application vanished into cyberspace. Her breath left in a trembling rush. It was done. By midweek, whispers had grown sharper. Names were already floating. Favourite vocalists from marketing, a shy junior assistant with impressive range. Victoria's submission felt like a fragile paper boat set adrift in a storm. And then, inevitably, Mira found her. Near the elevators, the director's perfume cut through the air first. Her lips curved into that cold imitation of a smile. "Heard you're trying out for global harmony," Mira purred, voice silk over steel. "That's adorable." Victoria swallowed. "I just thought it's an open opportunity." "Oh, it is," Mira said, stepping closer, voice dropping low enough to slice between them alone. "But be careful. Sometimes grabbing at things too high up makes people forget how far they have to fall. And it would be such a shame for your brief, comfortable stay here to turn unpleasant." Victoria's throat burned. She dipped her head, clutching her file to her chest as Mira breezed past, stilettos clicking like tiny hammers on marble. From down the hall, Junho turned a corner just in time to see Victoria retreating, shoulders hunched, eyes bright with something suspiciously close to tears. His step slowed, his hand tightening around the tablet he held. He didn't call out, didn't let her see him watching, but long after she disappeared into the copy room, he stood there, expression stormy and unreadable, as if waging a silent war with himself. Ever since the day Victoria had calmly translated dense international clauses in that sunlit conference room, voice steady even as her hands had trembled, something in Junho had started to slip. He began to notice her everywhere. The way she stayed late to double-check details on artists' contracts, brows drawn tight in focus. How she always bowed just a little deeper than required. How she carried stacks of papers that should have been delegated to interns, never complaining, just trying to belong. He told himself it meant nothing, that it was only professional curiosity noticing an employee who refused to let the sharp world of L&P swallow her whole. But it wasn't true. Because the more he watched her, the harder it became to kill the pull in his chest, the more dangerous it felt each time their eyes met in passing. And somewhere in the same silent stretch of days, Victoria's own heart had betrayed her too, daring to imagine what it would be like if he ever saw her as more than a name on a payroll slip. Though every time she caught herself, she stuffed the hope down fast, reminding herself he was out of reach by entire worlds. 2 days later, the email landed in Victoria's inbox. Short, cold, unsigned by any human hand. "Thank you for your submission. We regret to inform you that your application has not been shortlisted for the Global Harmony project. We encourage you to continue supporting L&P in your current role." Her hands trembled so hard she almost dropped her phone. She read it 3 times, willing it to change, but it stayed the same. A quiet bullet to the heart. No shortlist, no audition, no second chance. Still, late that afternoon, her feet carried her down to one of the practice rooms on the lower floor. The door stood half open, piano quiet in the corner. Empty, safe. She needed to let it out somewhere. The disappointment, the sting of hope that had been crushed under Mira's pointed heel. Victoria perched on the piano bench, pulling out a crumpled chord sheet she'd printed days ago. Her eyes drifted to the title at the top. All of Me. John Legend. A song she'd loved since she was 16, dreaming of a love that could see every imperfect piece and still stay. Her fingers tightened around the page. Then she closed her eyes and began to sing. Her voice was fragile at first, but then it found its shape. Tender, aching, curling around lyrics that felt like pieces of her own broken ribs. Here, alone, she could pretend it was still possible. that her song might reach someone. This, she didn't know it already had. A faint shift in the air behind her broke the last note. She turned with a small gasp and nearly lost her breath again. Junho stood just inside the doorway, his dark eyes fixed on her like he couldn't look away, shoulders drawn tight under his perfectly tailored jacket. For one electric moment, neither moved. It was as though the simple melody still echoed between them, stringing them together on something too delicate to name. He stepped forward. Victoria rose instinctively, backing into the piano, her hands curled against the wood, trying to ground herself. "Why were you in here?" His voice was low, not sharp but strangely rough, like he was forcing it through a tight throat. She swallowed. I didn't make the shortlist. I just needed to sing. Once, even if no one ever heard. His jaw worked, muscles feathering under skin. They didn't shortlist you. A statement, not a question. Something darkened in his eyes. He looked away for a second, like he might actually pace, then back at her, sharper, more searching. "Did Mira tell you why?" Victoria's breath caught. "No, just an automated rejection." Junho's expression twisted, part anger, part something more helpless. For a moment he seemed to war with himself. Then he stepped closer, so close she had to tilt her head to keep meeting his gaze. "You have no idea," he finally said, voice strained, "how dangerous it is for me to notice." Her heart jumped painfully. "Then why do you—" He didn't answer, just stared at her like he was memorizing every line of her face, the unsteady rise and fall of her chest. His hand lifted halfway before he stopped himself, curling it back into a fist. "Go home, Victoria," he rasped, almost like a plea. "Before I forget every line I've spent years drawing." Then he turned and left, footsteps clipped, each one sounding like it cost him more than the last. Victoria stood there long after the door shut, palms pressed flat to the piano, her breath shallow and wild. She didn't know if it was heartbreak pooling in her chest or something far more terrifying. Hope. Victoria spent the weekend trying to bury the memory of Junho's eyes on her. The rough catch in his voice when he'd said, "Before I forget every line I've spent years drawing." But on Monday morning, everything felt sharper. Whispers followed her through the office like tiny knives. She kept her head down, clutching a stack of artist contracts, forcing her feet to keep moving. She didn't expect to be summoned to the CEO's private floor. A stiff junior manager met her at the elevator, eyes darting anywhere but her face. "The CEO asked to see you immediately, alone." Victoria's pulse thundered. The ride up felt endless, each ding of the elevator doors slamming into her chest. When she stepped into Junho's office, the door clicked shut behind her, like it had locked out the entire world. He stood by the wide windows, city stretching below, one hand shoved in his pocket, the other rubbing the bridge of his nose. When he turned, his expression was storm-dark, but not with anger, something far more dangerous. Conflict, need, raw restraint. "You're avoiding me," he said quietly. Victoria hugged the folders tighter. "I've just been busy, trying not to misunderstand things." His mouth curved, but it wasn't a smile. More like pain. "I thought if I kept my distance, you'd fade back into the hundreds of names under this roof. But every day it's worse." She didn't dare breathe. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Then, almost as if dragged out of him, he said, "My entire life has been negotiated behind polished doors. I was raised to smile for photographs, sign contracts, and call it duty. Feelings were always liabilities. I killed them before they could kill me." He paused, dark eyes dropping to her lips for a heartbeat before dragging back up. "Until you." Her heart broke a little, even as it soared. "It's reckless, we could both—" "I know," his voice rasped, low and splintered. "But I don't care anymore." Before she could react, he crossed the final distance. One hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek so softly it nearly undid her. Then his forehead dropped to hers, breath warm and ragged. "Do you know what it's like?" he whispered. "To be completely in control of everything, except one person who shouldn't matter at all." Her lips parted, a tiny, helpless sound. His other hand slid around her waist, pulling her close. She didn't even realize she was trembling until he held her tighter. "Tell me to stop, Victoria, and I swear I will." She couldn't. Instead, her hands lifted, clutching the fabric of his suit. "Please, don't stop." A low groan escaped him, torn from somewhere deep. Then his mouth found hers, hungry, searching, a desperate breaking of every rule he'd built around his heart. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathless. His eyes were fierce, possessive. "This isn't going away," he murmured. "Not for me. If you'll have me, consequences be damned." She could only nod. Tears bright, joy and terror tangled in her chest. A month later, L&P was a hive of whispers. It started with a single blurry photo on an intern's phone. Victoria, stepping out of Junho's sleek black car one crisp morning, his hand briefly on her lower back. By lunch, it had turned into wildfire gossip. He personally drove her to work? Maybe she's just coordinating something for him. With his hand there, please. Mira didn't wait for rumours to settle. She stormed into Junho's office, her sharp heels striking the marble like war drums. Her expression was a perfect storm of shock and fury. "You're destroying everything," she hissed, barely keeping her voice from cracking. "Your family expects—" "My family expects? We've been tied together for decades, Junho. You're willing to throw all that away for— her? An employee with no pedigree, no— Careful, Junho said, his tone a deadly soft cut through her tirade. Mira faltered, blinking, then her eyes sharpened into a cruel, triumphant gleam. "You think your parents will let you off this easily? That they'll simply stand aside while you ruin years of plans for some nobody?" "You're joking." Junho pushed away from his desk, eyes dark, shoulders rigid. He walked slowly around it until he stood just a breath away from her, his voice low enough to flay. "You seem to believe my life is some legacy contract you're entitled to collect on. It isn't. And Victoria," his throat flexed as if steadying something far more volatile, "Victoria is not yours to sneer at, or threaten, ever again." Mira's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her painted composure cracked for the first time, eyes darting as though searching for some ally who wasn't there. "And as for my parents," Junho's gaze went diamond-hard. "They may have steered every corner of my life until now, but they do not get to dictate my future, or who I plan to spend the rest of it with." Her face drained of colour. When he added, voice a cold blade, "And if you think using bored whispers or family dinners to corner me will change this, try it. I'll dismantle every expectation you're clinging to. Publicly." Mira actually staggered back half a step. The silence that followed was frigid. She swallowed, throat working, before she turned sharply and stormed out. Her exit left an almost physical hush over the office beyond. Minutes later, Junho emerged from his office, the outer floor still buzzing in stunned ripples. Without hesitation, he walked straight to where Victoria stood, clutching a report, colour drained from her face. He took her hand in front of everyone, the interns, the junior managers, even the executive assistants who gaped outright. His fingers laced firmly with hers. A claim, a promise, and no one dared whisper anything after that. Later that evening, long after the building had emptied, Victoria found herself pulled gently into Junho's private lounge. Moonlight spilled through tall windows, catching in his eyes. "You didn't have to," she began, her voice small. "Yes, I did." His thumb traced her jaw, lingering like he couldn't quite bear to let go. "You've spent too long thinking you don't deserve to be fought for." Her throat tightened painfully. "It's just so many people watching." "Let them watch," he murmured, voice rough with emotion. "I've built empires with less conviction than I have about you." Then he kissed her, Slow, deep, nothing rushed. It was the kind of kiss that spoke of vows without words, of battles already won just by standing together. When they finally parted, Victoria rested her forehead against his, breath unsteady, heart soaring in terrifying, perfect freedom. In that quiet hush of moonlight and truth, she realized this wasn't just the end of longing, it was the start of everything. Do you think Junho should have chosen his duty over his heart? Or did he do the right thing by following love? Drop your opinion in the comments. I really want to know what you think. If you enjoyed this and want more K-drama vibe stories, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching.